Thank you so much, Erin. I'm really happy to be here today. As she mentioned, we're going to have a truly fantastic conversation around response innovation and staying connected. I've got some truly phenomenal people joining us today, and I would love for them to have a chance to introduce themselves, starting with Dawn Schrum with ITRON. Dawn.
Thank you, Joyce. My name's Dawn Schrum. I work at ITRON, a technology company dedicated to the resourceful management of electricity, gas, and water. And in recent years, we've gotten to work with a lot of cities. We've historically worked with utilities in cities, but now cities are becoming even more critical to modernizing infrastructure to manage resources more efficiently and make the cities safer for citizens. So we're thrilled to be able to play one small part in this broad initiative of making cities safer with companies and cities like the other panelists I'm pleased to be presenting with today. So thanks for having me here, and I'm really looking forward to it.
No, we're so glad you're joining us. Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Grigsby. I am the Director of Innovation and Technology for the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Public safety is very near and dear to my heart. I'm a former police officer and was the CIO for the Kansas City Police Department. I've been in the smart city space, and one of the things I've said for a long time is you can't have a smart city unless it's a safe city. So watching how technology impacts us, communities, and certainly every aspect of those communities, I think is going to be a great topic to talk about today.
Yeah, I know that everyone's looking forward for hearing your perspective. And the same with Bob. I'd love to hear more about yourself.
Hi, thanks, Joyce. Bob Champagne. I'm Vice President of Customer Experience Innovation with Smart Energy Water, who I know Z Prime's no stranger to. I've been in the industry in the power sector for about going on 35 years now. A little bit about SEW. We are the leading customer experience platform, end-to-end customer experience platform for orchestrating just about every customer journey that takes place in the for utility customers, and that ranges from the simplest of customer journeys, new connections, bill payment, all the way to the really complex kinds of orchestration required in at times of service interruptions, outages, and I think about public safety, and I think about the dynamics at play when we have interruptions like that. Our CEO likes to say we can't live without water and we can't innovate without power. And I think that's particularly relevant, when we see hurricanes and wildfires and other critical events that require an enormous amount of orchestration to deal with. And so, I'm looking forward to today and talking about, how we approach that and our platform being at the center of that. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to get going. But before I do that, I just want to shout out to the audience, really happy that you're participating today. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box throughout. I'll make sure that we get them addressed as we move forward. And so the panel. So smart communities are more than intelligent technologies, right? And they can offer life-saving services as well. And during the 2019 or the COVID-19 pandemic, it really highlighted areas that needed to be addressed for overall resiliency and public safety. And, we're moving through that still, but I think there were a lot of really great lessons learned. And today we're really going to be talking about how communities are leveraging innovation to aid first responders and partners during these critical events and what it really means to kind of reimagine these relationships. So to kick us off, while innovation can be a challenging process and dealing with critical systems can be even more complex, what are some of the ways that communities have approached innovation within public safety? Mike, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I think the way your lead into this, Joyce, is a great way to take a look at this. I've said for a long time that public safety has been a very broad umbrella, and if we learned anything through COVID-19, we learned that there's even a lot more that goes under public safety. When we start to think about some of the impacts to our critical infrastructure, gas lines, water, Bob will talk about that more as we go through, but there's a lot that goes under the public safety umbrella. And it's important, I think, for everybody to understand that this isn't just about first responders. There is so much, it's such a broad topic that we have to pay attention to all of the different facets within our communities and within society that this touches. So when we think about the innovation that's happening within public safety, it's easy to think about things like body-worn cameras, right? There was a tremendous outcry. Outcry may be too strong a word, but there's a tremendous request and demand on the public side to have greater transparency and greater visibility into first responder behaviors and things along those lines. That provides a wonderful beginning step to collaboration and communication and cooperation with first responders as community partners. But I think it goes beyond that too, right? When we start to think about our response to a global pandemic, right? We think about that in terms of public safety and how did communities respond to that? When we look at sending everybody home away from the workplace literally overnight, the responsiveness to that really does fall under a public safety umbrella. And I think COVID is a tremendous example of how we need to broaden our perspective, how we need to broaden our dialogue about what public safety is, and start thinking about how everybody plays in that. It's easy to think about those who are professional public safety respondents or practitioners, but it really does fall to Joe and Jill Q. Citizen to understand the roles that they play. Corporations, businesses, nonprofits, everybody is playing in this. And so I think this is a great topic to begin with, and really understanding the breadth of what public safety means.
Thank you. Dawn.
Yeah, Mike, I'll echo those sentiments and maybe just share a couple of examples we see. From the utility side, we often share the example that customers expect to turn on the light and have the lights come on, or turn on the water faucet and have water. When we're all at home and the grid, people probably saw different news articles highlighting how energy use shifted. Combine that with, now we're in the summer and it's hot and there's rolling blackouts. You can really take what Mike said to heart, that some of these basic things we need to live fall within the realm of public safety. So while first responders and having more information is certainly helpful, we don't want to overlook the ability we have to gather more information about electricity usage, about where people have access to things like internet in addition to electricity and water, but all these basic things that we call necessities, become harder for people to have access to, especially when public areas where they may have been going for some of those services are no longer accessible. So there's a really powerful way that we can work, across public-private partnerships and innovate. And I think we really need to start with the basics and not lose sight of that.
That's a really great point. I mean, I think that having worked in the public-private partnership space for a little while, seeing the excitement around innovation and what tends to happen where we can maybe put the cart before the horse and chase some of those more bigger schemes when we really need to get back to basics, Dawn. I think that's a really great point, especially when you're talking about public health and safety. You want to make sure that we get the foundations taken care of. Bob, would love to get your perspective on the first question.
Yeah, so when I think, and I agree with everything Dawn and Mike said, and in your opening, Joyce, I think when it comes to innovation, I think we'd all agree it's more than the cool ideas or the cool technology, right? I think for me, it's more about, it starts with changing the lens through which we look at the problem. And I think one of the most important aspects about about, that will drive innovation in this space is how we look at the customer and the communication and the coordination between all of the parts, and but changing the lens through which we look at that. I was reminded in talking through this yesterday with you guys of a experience I had during Hurricane Sandy up in the Northeast. And for many of us that were in that situation, we probably remember calling the utility. My utility actually had a canned response that said, your power is out. It's going to be 7 to 10 days. We have nobody available to talk to you. See you later, essentially, right? And I remember my son, we were just looking to find out when the truck was even close by the neighborhood, so we could know whether we needed to go out of town or stay. And my son showing me on Facebook, just doing a hashtag for Jersey Central Power and Light, right? That he sees residents communicating with each other, and he's getting more information from social media than he is from the call center. And then later in that whole progression, we start seeing some of the innovative utilities actually participating and facilitating that conversation. So I think changing the lens on how we look at the problem is really the cornerstone for catalyzing some of this innovation.
Great, thank you so much. We did have a question come in. Thank you, Darren. And the question is around Darren having several conversations in the past with former police chiefs who say the future of law enforcement and public safety doesn't need more officers, but better technology. And do you agree with that? And what specific technology do you see coming or needed? Is this more video surveillance or more AI or drones? I know that from some of the conversations that I've had, there's a lot more about process improvement and better data management of existing data and leveraging that kind of technology prior to implementing some of this other stuff. But I would love to hear from you guys what you're seeing from that space and what might be coming.
I'll chime in and say that I would say it doesn't necessarily mean more officers. And we have to play in that not necessarily space, right? What does it actually mean? I 100% see that more technology is going to be a force multiplier, and we have to think about it in those terms. But I've said this before, is that we don't really solve problems, we just make trade-offs. So getting more technology on one side creates a trade-off to dealing with something on the other side. And not to kind of play the end against the middle there, but I think we have to understand what that really means. AI is a tremendous technology that can give us a huge lift. But are we ready for it? Is society understand what that means? Or can we be responsible with it? Drones, another tremendous benefit. I've already seen how in Sioux Falls, how our police department and our fire department, as well as our communications team, have utilized that to serious benefit. Last year during the civil unrest and challenges that we had with riots here, drone technology was a phenomenal additional tool. How does the public play with that? We see issues like in Toronto, in the Quayside project, a lot of great technology that was truly on the cutting edge, but it had some unintended consequences, if we will, with regard to how the public was ready for it. So I think that the technology is there and can absolutely, again, be a force multiplier. We have to be ready to learn how to metabolize that in a way that keeps privacy where it's supposed to be and keeps transparency where it's supposed to be. And that's a nuance, that's a dance that we're going to have to learn and really understand as we go forward.
Yeah, I've lost track of the number of examples I have where I've talked with cities that have used different, I won't call them surveillance technologies, but one partner we work with is a gunshot location detection solution, and there's some photo surveillance and audio associated with that. They've had numerous discussions where customers they're talking to had already deployed technology, but they weren't getting it to do what they needed it to do. They weren't able to leverage the data, or it wasn't quite the right technology. So I reiterate the point of it can't be technology for technology's sake. There's no easy button to this. And when we're talking about cities where, Mike, I'm sure you could speak better than us here, that budget is a real factor and you have to prioritize that spend, which is tough. We can't just spend it on all the cool new stuff. We as vendors too have to make sure how to make the data easy to analyze and use to achieve the outcome, not just gather the data, because that's not going to get us anywhere.
Hey, Mike, I both of you, I love those points, and I love what you said, Mike, on metabolizing the technology, or however you referred to it. I think, couple of follow-ups to that. One is on the privacy side. Utilities have really wrestled for a long time with the whole smart meter movement, right? And so much so that my home state of New Jersey just began this journey. A little embarrassing, right? Because how long it's been in play. But I think part of the problem is we haven't educated customers. We haven't, and I guess more than educate, right? We haven't embedded this into the natural workflows that customers go through. I had a boss one time who said, customers don't want to be engaged with when it comes to utilities. And while the customer experience community might cringe at that, it's true, right? We don't long to engage with our utilities. So the more we can take technology that we put in place, whether it's smart meters or any of the technologies you just mentioned, and make this really invisible and put it into the customer journeys so that it's just a natural progression, that's going to go a long way to, as you said, metabolizing the information and the technology.
Really great, Bob. Thank you. We actually did have a question come in from Jason, which was how we can better educate and inform customers about privacy and data sharing concerns associated with new technologies, and at the same time also communicate the benefits, from new city or municipal services. And so I think from the utility side, Bob, you definitely touched on that. But Mike or Dawn, if you want to take a stab at that question that just came in, would love to hear your perspective.
I won't share. There's lots of best practices around how to better educate and inform citizens, and I'm sure we could all come up with a lot of great answers. So I'm not going to tackle that part of the question. There's lots we could talk about there, but I think when I see this question, what I think about is, let's make sure that there really is a benefit to gathering this data on people for the city, or that if it is personal information, or even if it's has some level of privacy involved, let's make sure there's real benefit, because sometimes we as technologists might think, oh, it's no big deal. Well, people really take their privacy seriously. They don't want video cameras everywhere. I mean, if we're going to do it, let's be mindful. And that should be the first test, because there will be people that don't want any of this information gathered about them. And I caution on the data sharing as well. I think Toronto, other places have taught us not everybody thinks it's so cool to be a part of these experiment projects and have their data shared, even if we assure them that it's anonymous. So I think we have to take a really hard look in the mirror and make sure there is that benefit to the public. And then we can get to the step of communicating the value. But we've got to fine tune those use cases and make sure it's worth the work, because it is a long time consuming process to educate, because it is important to people.
Yeah, I would echo that and just say that, as we become an increasingly digital society, the challenge for municipalities is to kind of keep our foot on first base while also trying to stretch to second base. We have to, it becomes a both and world instead of an either or world. And the challenge is that so much of the technology, especially, those of us who have grown up and remember 1984 and Big Brother watching, right? There's always a tendency to kind of either weaponize or villainize this data gathering and what we think about this. On the other side of that spectrum, though, is the convenience and the experience that we really want to craft for the customer or the resident, right? It's one thing, if I'm able to, if I, interact with a city to, submit a building permit, I've already given you a lot of my information. Now, if I want to turn around and also, register for a swim class at the local community center, why do I need to give you my information again? At the same time, I don't want you to have all of that information or play with all that information. I want to be able, as the consumer, as the resident, I want to control what that relationship to my data looks like. There are some things where I want to play on the totally closed. I don't want you to have anything, and I'm okay with the hassle of having to kind of reinvent the wheel or put my information in every time for that. But then there's the other side of that spectrum where I'm okay giving you a lot more information and trying to dial that in and figure out what that looks like and how a municipality actually delivers that kind of experience. One, that's very costly. Two, it's nebulous. It's not defined. But I think there's an extreme value in trying to understand how we craft good experiences, how we manage that privacy, and how we manage the transparency. And that is I think that's going to be a growing skill set. If we want to talk about the future of work, understanding how to navigate that will be a burgeoning field I can see for the years ahead.
There's something I'd just add to that. From the utility side of things, I don't think utilities by and large have been good custodians of the data. And what I mean by that is I don't think they have. I think they have dealt with the privacy aspects, and they're good at explaining that to the customer. But what you just pointed to, Mike, in terms of working that into the experience, I know of at least 3 companies who can actually use the smart meter data to identify a fault in an appliance, right? They can identify when a HVAC system is starting to fail. They could send a customer an alert. We know of a utility who's actually sending an alert that says, we noticed this, and if you'd like us to come out and send a technician. And that's a wow experience for a customer, right? That's an experience that says, you don't even have to think much about how the utility gets that information. You're thinking it delivered value to me. And I think that's much more important than, or much more valuable than just communicating, don't worry about the privacy, we got it covered, right?
Thank you all. I appreciate that. To kind of get back on track a little bit with this response, communication with citizens is at the heart of a smart city, right? Especially in times of crisis. And, what role does the communication and digital inclusion play in staying connected? Dawn, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think it's a key part of the equation, right? The technology isn't going to solve the problem. The communication and collaboration between multiple groups within the city or county or whatever the area is important. So I think this is where, when it comes to communication, it's not just here's our communication plan, we're going to do all these great things and push it out. Before that step, I think it's important to gather a diverse set of stakeholders to the table, diverse in terms of roles, areas of where the projects are taking place. I mean, every slice of diversity we can think of, diverse perspectives, so that we're not missing any of the groups that are impacted by these projects. I think most of the projects we all work on have great intentions, but sometimes by not doing that planning step and thinking through all the different stakeholders and groups, we might fail. And it just takes missing one of those things to have, kind of a flat-footed start to a project, or maybe rub some of the intended beneficiaries the wrong way. So I think cross collaboration and casting a wide net are key.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I agree. I think communication is kind of, it's kind of a funny word, you know, we think about communication in a legacy context in terms of keeping people informed and kind of one-way communication. And I think we're moving to a world where it's, I've used the word earlier today, you know, orchestration. It's more about how do you orchestrate all the pieces. And I think that's particularly relevant in critical events where you just have enormous numbers of stakeholders involved. And I think as we climb into this, you know, utility transition, and we're starting to see environments where it's not just the utility anymore, right? It's the installers, it's the builders, it's the retail energy companies, it's the regulated utilities, it's the commercial customers, right? And this ecosystem just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And share just a quick example. I was visiting my 83-year-old father-in-law last week, and he asked me about an email that he got that said his solar panel had stopped communicating with the network. And so I dug into it a little bit, and I found out that the panel stopped communicating in February of 2020. Now, you would think that that's a time where everybody, you know, every stakeholder in the system should have started screaming, you're losing $100, $120 a month, but they didn't, right? This was an innocuous email from one part of the system that went to a spam folder. So if we don't get better at orchestrating all the parts, we're going to miss huge I mean, it's going to be risk, right? Big risk, and we're going to miss opportunities to even innovate further.
Good point, Bob. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I'll just finish out by saying that digital divide, digital equity, digital inclusion. I was on a call yesterday that referred to it as digital advancement. It's easy to take a look at this as and kind of swing it just to technology, but this is about, you know, this is about economic vitality. This is about community vibrancy, safety and security, which is our topic today. This is about workforce development, economic development. It touches every facet within the communities. And I think the opportunity is one I should say is that we don't have to try to figure this all out today, right? Humanity has learned how to you know, evolve over time, and we're going to figure this out. We'll get through that. I think the opportunity for municipalities and certainly for providers and partners to those municipalities is how do you do this on purpose, right? How do you begin to look at this and say, we know this is ahead of us. Here's how we're going to begin working towards it, right? We don't have to solve it all today, but here's how we're going to be doing this on purpose. Here's how we're going to have some intentionality around these initiatives, and getting your citizens and your residents more into the digital space. Again, I talked about we're an increasingly digital society. As you increase those skill sets, people will become more engaged. And that engagement just leads to a lot more opportunities for the municipality from a competitiveness standpoint, from a resiliency standpoint. And those are the things that we need to be paying attention to. And again, it's easy to talk about a topic like digital divide or, you know, even public safety technology and think in terms of the gadgets and gizmos around technology, but there's real outcomes that we really need to pay attention to, and being able to do as much of that as we can on purpose, I think is what we should be focused on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I know we've kind of talked about some of the challenges and barriers so far, but I would really love to hear about, you know, what are the opportunities you see within public safety innovation that gets you jazzed up, or that makes you really thrilled to be part of, you know, working on these initiatives. Bob.
Yeah, I was thinking yesterday when I saw the questions about, you know, how would I frame the opportunities for innovation, and I'll look at it through the utility lens again. I think there are opportunities going all the way back to prevention, right? There's a prevention aspect of this even before the critical event or the safety concern happens. There's prevention, there's kind of response, there's plenty of opportunities for innovating in how we respond to those events. There's recovery. There's even in the case of big events like Katrina, Sandy, wildfires, there's rebuild aspects of this event. And I think along the way there's opportunities, to innovate. I think the biggest opportunity that I see for innovation, and I guess I'm a little biased, is how we orchestrate the experience between the different stakeholders. I agree with what Mike just said. It goes beyond the gadgets and the gizmos. It's how do you recognize what communication and coordination between the stakeholder groups is required at each level in that progression, from prevention all the way to response and recovery.
Excellent. Don.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The prevention aspect, some of the coolest things we'll all work on might not be the headline grabbing things that people see. That we hope to avoid those. So I think there's some level of that in the work that we all do, since we're working with communities, it's unsung hero work that you guys get to do every day. But I think there's something cool about being able to positively impact the lives of people every single day. It may not be a glamorous solution. Oh, my watch is going off. I apologize. It may not be a glamorous solution, but there are ways where you can make life just a little bit easier for citizens every day. And it can be done by taking data that you're already gathering, taking the same processes we've already been doing for decades, but doing it more efficiently and giving people more visibility and control into what they're doing and helping guide them to more positive outcomes. So I think endless potential, but think of what more we can do more quickly with having more data at our fingertips and getting the groups within our organizations to talk to each other more easily and solve problems before they arise.
Yeah, most definitely. I think also too, Don, you mentioned the other day that, public safety isn't just about some of this emergency response stuff, but some of this also has to do with like wastewater management and prevention of, contamination or flood management, and how those things kind of come into play.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if we didn't know that, there was a huge incident in our own country where water was contaminated? Wouldn't it have been great if we wouldn't be dealing with that? Now we all know about it and we're focused on it, but let's make sure, water pipes aren't contaminated. Let's make sure there's not sewage spilling down the streets. Like, again, things we all take for granted. It's awful, but these are the critical services everyone provides, and we have more. We have the ability to predict these outcomes more and prevent them once we have this information. So I think that's super cool.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
I think from a tactical standpoint, several years ago, when I was still with the police department, one of the things that was really growing, an interest that was growing for police organizations across the country, was developing fusion centers or real-time crime centers. And one of the interesting characteristics about data is that it's a non-consumable resource, meaning it can be used multiple times without any degradation to it, right? So we can have a piece of data and a lot of different entities can use that piece of data without compromising it. And so what I think we'll start to see is, as those fusion centers, or certainly the idea and the concept of those fusion centers still continues, the technology is going to start to come down in cost. We're going to be able to start to kind of create micro distribution around that fusion center concept, and it'll make it easier. I mean, when everybody's carrying around one of these devices, how do we get that kind of data into the hands, not only of police, law enforcement, first responders, but how do we get that same information into the hands of fire first responders, or EMS first responders, or public utility first responders, right? This is all happening within a community, and there's, all of these different entities are touching or having some relationship to those incidents. So how do we share the right components of all of that information across the multiple agencies that are going to have some kind of interaction with it?
Awesome, thank you. So what are some of the pitfalls that cities can avoid, Mike, when approaching innovation within critical services?
I think we've kind of mentioned it. Don't think too narrowly. Think about all of the stakeholders. I think it's important to also widen your scope of who you consider to be a stakeholder, right? There's the traditional stakeholders for each problem that we've dealt with in the past, but then there's the non-traditional ones. How does a nonprofit food pantry play into public safety technology? I don't have an answer for that, but should they be considered as a stakeholder in concerns around that? How do some of the other, how does your local health system or your some of your trade associations, how do they play into this? And so broadening that up, one, I don't want to create, I don't want cities to try to make it overly complex, but at the same time, make sure that you're bringing enough people to the table to have the conversation, because there are aspects about this that we may not consider. I remember a project that I worked on with one city prior to joining Sioux Falls. They had problem with flash flooding. They were in a valley and they had problem with flash flooding, and they lost several lives in the homeless community as a result of that. Well, being able to understand all of the stakeholders that were there, they reached out to park ranger and other what you might not have considered to be stakeholders. We were able to put sensors up on the mountain to track water flow coming from that. And so based on flow rate, we were able to get messaging out and warnings out faster in the valley than we would have otherwise. And so again, that may not be the best example, but that's one example of how you integrate and invite more non-traditional stakeholders to the table.
Great, thank you. Don or Bob?
Yeah, I agree a lot with that, with your point about failing to identify or failing to recognize who the stakeholders are. I think for me, it's also about knowing how each stakeholder either is a generator of intelligence or data, or is a consumer of that data, and how they use that information during the event, right? And I'm not a crime expert or in the same environment that Mike's in, for example, but when I think about all of the stuff that happened in Minneapolis not too long ago, it seems not too long ago, and the milestone cameras that we all heard about, and a lot of that technology has historically been thought of after the fact, right? It's been thought of, rather than maybe thinking about that in the course and in the moment of the situation, and I think that goes back to failing to really understand who all the stakeholders were, where are all the points of integration, where those could be, and looking for a way to orchestrate that in maybe real time, right? And I think we see that a lot in just going back to the smart meter example we were talking about before. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of use cases and applications for that data. It's just we haven't brought those to the surface and found a way to integrate those into our business. So yeah, I mean, seeing who the stakeholders are, understanding their role in the equation and what they can bring and take from the interaction, I think is critical.
Yeah, I'll just add, short and sweet, it's a business process transformation as much of a technology transformation. A big part of that's what these two gentlemen mentioned, which is thinking of those stakeholders, but also what are the processes or different ways of thinking we need to take, not just shoving the technology into an existing process that might not work as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we have about 4 minutes left on the panel. So any other last minute questions from the audience, would love to capture them now. I do have one final question for you all, which has to do with partnerships. I know we've touched on stakeholders and communication, but I think this panel is a really great representation of the partners within the ecosystem. We have a city representative, we have a utilities representative, we have an industry representative. And the only piece is missing is education, I think, from education stakeholders that could kind of come into that. So I think it might be beneficial for the audience to hear from each one of your partner perspectives on your roles within these ecosystems and how you guys, what your main driver focus is. So that way they can go back to their hometowns and they can collaborate better with their partners. So Mike, if you kick us off.
I think it can all just be encapsulated by saying it takes a village, right? Those partnerships are absolutely crucial, especially speaking from a municipality, right? Internally, a municipality, whether, even a municipality the size of Los Angeles or New York or Chicago, right? They don't have all of the expertise. We can't bring that in, and that's not even the purpose of the municipality as an organization, right? So going outside and being able to find those partners and find that expertise is absolutely critical for how we move this forward. And trying to shoulder it all under one roof is I think that's just a recipe for disaster, or certainly missing the mark. So I think we have to lean on those outside expertise and those outside partners.
Yeah, and I'll say as a oh, sorry, Bob.
No, go ahead.
Technology company, we know that we're not, we provide networks, we provide a number of devices, safety enhancing devices, electricity, water and gas related devices, but we know we're not going to be able to solve every customer's problem on our own. So we have to be open. So we've made a commitment to make our network open. We work with Smart Energy Water as an example. We need to keep doing that so that you all have the choice to bring the right solutions to meet your city's use case, not trying to have one of us try to sell you what we have and box you in. So I think you just need to look for those partners that help complement you and do things like this and talk to different companies and agencies to help find the best solution, not just the hot solution of the moment, because it's going to be different tomorrow. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I agree. I mean, I agree. It takes a village. I've always aspired to finding defining best of breed partnerships, right? Knowing you're not great at everything, and very likely you're great at one slice of this equation. And I think for Smart Energy Water, that's the orchestration of customer and workforce experiences. But like Dawn mentioned, I mean, we are a headless platform, right? We have the ability to integrate with just about any part of the energy and utilities ecosystem. And when we think about it that way, we look for best of breed partners who can fill a gap or or demonstrate a competency. So what we're building is an all-star team, not just a collection of random players. So I concur with what Mike and Dawn shared.
Awesome. Well, I mean, thank you all for giving us such a balanced perspective today on, response innovation and staying connected. I think it's time for me to kick it back over to Aaron for the next panel coming up. Anyways, thank you all so much. Appreciate you.